What is up, Internet Basketball Junkies? Tonight, I'm sitting down with Coach Tom McBride. He's got 25 plus years at one program, 300 plus wins, multiple district championships, and a career built in one of the toughest leagues in the state of Ohio. I don't consider this just an interview here. I think we're going to deep dive into a lot of things, including, building a program that lasts. So some of the topics of tonight's conversation are going to be the 5-out upscreen offense. We'll watch some film on that. The anatomy of an upset, how to beat teams that are better than you. Sideline delay concept and tempo control ideas. Program building, and coaching your own sons. So, Coach McBride, thanks so much for coming on and joining us and talking hoops here tonight. Can you hear me, Coach?
I can, yes. Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always fun to discuss basketball, especially since the season has just finished up, and it's going to be a great way to reflect not only on this year, but a lot of past teams and things that we've done at Lake High School.
Yeah, so you've got more than 25 years at Lake. You've got over 300 wins. You're still coaching. What keeps you going, Coach?
It's the kids. I really enjoy the energy that they bring. The tough part I think in coaching is knowing you're going to have down years. We've had a couple, but it wasn't because they weren't working hard or trying to have the success of the past. You get to the point, I think, as you continue to coach, that you feel bad that each team can't have the success that some teams have. But you keep trying to stretch and learn new things. It's the greatest thing about basketball. There's new concepts, new ideas, as we just came off the NCAA tournament and watching these kids come back and really showing you how much and telling you how much they enjoyed playing basketball for you.
Yeah, and coaching in the Federal League is tough. We both know that. And yeah, you're going to have some down years because there's a lot of teams that have a lot of resources, very historical programs in there, a high population of students. So you're coaching in one of the toughest conferences in the state. How do you feel like that's kind of shaped you as a coach through the years?
Yeah, I think it's really shaped us as far as, maybe we can't play a run and gun style. I know sometimes we take a little bit of heat for that. People love to put 80 points up on the board night in and night out. I think we've had to maintain a lot of tempo in our program throughout the years to beat teams that, athletically are better than us year in and year out. We've had to, manage some ball control systems. And it's just been tough year to year, looking out and realizing some of the athletes we're going to play probably became a little more zone oriented than I wanted to be at times. I'd really like to be a better man defensive team 24/7, but we've had to roll with those punches and try to take away other teams' strengths to be in a basketball game.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson there for coaches, which is that your style of play that you'd prefer as a coach and what's best for your community or your kids isn't always the same thing. And, what are you thinking there? Are you thinking in terms of trying to position the kids in your community in the best chance for them to win games? Or are you trying to exercise, your creative freedom as a coach to try to play a style of play that you like to play? But, Coach, you recently passed 300 wins for your coaching career. Take me back to that night. What made that night special?
Again, we were in a little tournament style at the Canton Field House, which, I've said and I've always said it's my favorite place to coach. I think it's just one of the best arenas in Stark County, let alone the state of Ohio, to play a basketball game in. We had an opportunity to play Struthers. We were not having a great season that year, and for those kids to rally up, and sometimes that makes it even sweeter. A team that was just stretching to try to achieve wins and then to get that honor during that time period. It's easy if you go 20-0 every year and, 15 years you got it licked. But this team really strove and focused in to try to achieve that accomplishment. And they were every bit a part of it, even though they weren't a 15-win team by any means.
Tell me about the celebration. Who's there? Your family? I'm sure you had probably a glass of ice water knowing you. How'd you celebrate your 300th win?
Yeah, I'd say after the game, we ended up going to a local establishment, and a couple boosters were there, and they took care of us a little bit with some food on the table. Um, another thing I do remember, I had somebody convince me to play Keno that night, and I won $500 in Keno, so it was like a double victory for me. I don't think I've ever hit since, but hey, it happened to be that day.
So you get your 300th win. You're in the Canton Field House, and we'll touch on your dad a little bit later. But did it mean anything extra special to you to get your 300th win at the Canton Field House where your dad was a coach?
Yeah, yeah, like I said, ever since I was a little kid, we lived 4 blocks away. It was nothing for dad and I to walk down. There were always double headers, or even in my youth, there were 4 games in one night at the field house. And the ice cream sandwiches in between the quarters and halves, those were the best in town. And it just kind of brought everything back to fruition. You're in a place that you started watching the game at as a kid, and you have a chance to win 300th game there as a coach, and it just really put a lifetime of memories and good times right in that gym.
Yeah, you've been at this coaching thing in a while now, and I'm interested if you can think back to your early head coaching days, and if you had maybe a welcome to the big league type of moment, whether it was a coach that you were going against or a situation that happened in a game. I can think back to my first year as a head coach, and we had won our first game against Minerva of the season and of my coaching career. Second game, we were playing against Northwest, and we were cruising to another victory. I think we were up about 10 points at halftime. And Coach Lauer threw some half court trap at us to start the second half. And I had nothing for it, and our kids weren't prepared for it. And that really led me on a mission to learn the 1-3-1. I started running it shortly after that, and I started understanding how to beat it. But we choked that game away, and it was due to my lack of experience. I would say that was my kind of welcome to the big league moment. Can you think of something in your coaching career?
Yes, we used to play our tournament down at the Canton Civic Center, and we scratched the surface out of the gate with 12 wins, and I owe Bruce Brown a lot of credit for that. He became our AD, and I became the basketball coach, and I kind of dovetailed on the things that he was doing, and then put my own stamp on some things. And we got to about year 3, and kind of out of surprise, we were a 9 or 10 win team, and we go down to the Civic Center, and we beat a Maslin team that had NFL player Sean Crable on it, excuse me, and then we turned around and beat I think the number 1 or 2 ranked team in the state with Perry Panthers. Coach Fred Neal, he had a kid by the name of Jeff Houston. Next thing you know, we find ourselves in a district final for the first time, uncharted territory. We played Maslin Jackson, and I think we lost 74-29. It just was a humbling moment of, okay, you think you're getting somewhere in your program, but in a district final, we were totally embarrassed and totally outplayed. And I think it taught us that we needed to really teach some toughness the next couple years in our program.
So would that be a Larry Taylor team at Jackson?
Definitely a Larry Taylor team at Jackson, yes.
Yeah, so Larry Taylor is a kind of a local coaching legend around here. He coached a kid named Jamie Bosley who scored a ton of points and won a lot of games. But yeah, I can remember my dad taking me to games to watch Coach Taylor, and he was a very high profile coach, certainly locally at the time, and had that Jackson program really humming. We've coached against each other, and we've crossed paths not only in the regular season, but we've crossed paths at a place called the Eastern Ohio Basketball Camp. I'd like to start a little conversation about the Eastern Ohio Basketball Camp. Are you still taking your teams there, Coach?
Yes, we are. I've probably been taking at least for 20 straight years now teams there. I can remember the first team I took, I knew nothing about the camp. I've got a funny story for you. So I took 8 guys. And those of you in Ohio that have been to that camp know that 8 guys are going to be worn out by night 1 because you play a variety of games. And I never had the nerve to really ask any other coaches a whole lot of information. So they put us in one of the barns to sleep in, basically. And I slept right there with my players, having no idea that there were cabins set aside for the coaches to sleep in. So it was kind of funny. From there on, we started taking our freshmen on up, asked a few questions, understood that coaches could sleep in different barracks than the kids, and it's just been a nice tradition. And every year I put it on our form. What are you looking forward to this summer? And our kids just have really bought into Eastern Ohio camp.
Yeah, so let's unpack Eastern Ohio camp for the viewers out there that aren't from Ohio. We're talking about a multi-day overnight camp. This is played outdoors on outdoor courts. There's no officials. Some of your games might be inside of a barn. And it's ran by the Huggins family. I think Larry Huggins is the point person for it, but his dad is connected to it. And so this would be the Bob Huggins family that we're talking about. But you're out in the middle of nowhere in Sherrodsville, Ohio. The cuisine is not quite gourmet, to say the least. But this is one of the best team bonding experiences that you can do for your team in an off season over at Eastern Ohio camp. You basically hang out with your team and play basketball all day long. And, it's pretty much from sun up to sundown. You're playing basketball games, and you might get a break to rest a little bit here and there or to eat some food, but it's pretty much basketball all day long. You might have maybe 30 teams descending on Sherrodsville, Ohio, and you play these 15-minute running clock games. You keep your own score, and there's, it's officiate your own game, so things can get pretty rough. But you find out a lot about your team, and your team has just a tremendous opportunity to spend a lot of time with one another. So any kind of additional thoughts on or memories about Eastern Ohio camp?
Well, number one, a lot of coaches can't keep score. There's a lot that win every game. It's kind of amazing. Um, no, it really is more the team building, like you're saying, and the nice part, for us is we've never had any. It's worked out positive. There hasn't been any hazing situations. We haven't had any craziness where we've had to send somebody home. We've had an injury or two that I've had to put somebody in the car and come up here to meet their parents, kind of break that being able to stay down there, but. Just like you said, the memories of getting down there and pulling out a ball that isn't an indoor ball and having a little practice in the summer on a Sunday afternoon and, the kids meeting and then boom, you're right into games, 15 minutes or first one to 21. You got pods of 3. You kind of have games you're really looking forward to. And it just really wets that whistle, finding out who you're going to be, what kind of competition you can handle and where your weaknesses are along with your strengths.
Yeah, it's a great test for your team, particularly their toughness, physical and mental toughness. It's kind of fun to play, these shorter 15-minute games where as a coach you can kind of dial up your best stuff all, in short order, and then the game's over and you're back to doing it again pretty shortly. You can really master your pet backdoor play or your pet lob play. You can really get a lot of work in on that. But I really enjoyed crossing paths with different coaches and crossing paths with different teams at Eastern Ohio camp, where you're meeting a lot of different coaches. You might play one game against a big school Division I, and then your next game's against a Division IV team, and you don't really control your schedule. You just go out and play basketball all day long. So, Coach, I'd kind of like to pivot. My audience really likes tactics, and what I'd like to get into with you is this 5-out upscreen concept that you helped me put a guide together for. So I wanted to scan through this document a little bit, talk about the offense, and then we'll throw some film up. But this has been well received by the Matt Hackenberg basketball coaching audience here. And I think there's an appeal to it. It's got the 5-out structure. It's got kind of a continuity pattern to it. So there's a control element to it with the coach, but there's all kinds of fun options that spring up out of this offense. So, you've obviously the offense is named after this up screen that takes place, which we'll take a look at, but you get into a lot of post up situations. So if you have a team that can post up a variety of players, you can really work the low block. You get into, some split action like the Golden State Warriors. There's some opportunities for baseline penetration, and there's some really good opportunities to attack pressure defensive teams are really coming after you. But, you showed me this offense, and I've, coached against you running this offense and saw how hard it was to guard. I'm interested in, when you went to this offense, what kind of problem did you think you were solving for your team?
We first went to this offense. Number one, I got to give Sean McCartney, who's an assistant at North Canton Hoover, some credit here. I was getting into the Princeton. He knew it a little better than I did. Sitting in his basement, talking to him a little bit, he was showing me what Air Force does with their Princeton. This would have been back 12, 13 years ago. And we kind of stole some of those ideas and then kind of created them into our own. And this was kind of the combination of once Princeton went through their split action or their chin action, they noticed that they were Air Force, and they kind of went into this 1-2-2 type of action. We probably became a little bit more patterned than they did, but that's kind of where the orientation of this has come from. And then I look at, we're playing Canton McKinley. At the time, there was a coach at North Canton Hoover that really liked to get out and deny you on the wings. And we were really having trouble entering the ball against more athletic teams. And so this was a way for us to start our offense without a screen, because our point guards weren't ones that could really hold off the other team's defensive guard for a long period of time. We needed to get the offense started. And so by either back cutting or getting a handoff to get it started seemed to be a nice way for us back when we started putting this in.
Yeah, so we're looking at the basic kind of starting alignment where you would call this a 1-2-2, which is accurate, but it's not quite as sexy for the basketball coaches out there as 5 out. They like 5 out a lot better than 1-2-2, even though it's the same thing. But we've got those wings really spaced high. You call that kind of NBA spacing. And then we're entering the offense with kind of a dribble at back door. So you'll see some on the film that we watched. There's a lot of pretty sexy looking backdoor plays that your team hits. But that's one of the ways that you can really relieve pressure is you send that cutter back door, you fill from behind, and it creates this kind of triangle setup that you can really work. So you work that in a variety of ways. You could throw it right into the post if you wanted. Then you'd work this kind of up screen action is what I call it. You could look into the post again if you wanted at this point, but then you have some opportunities to reverse the ball in some different ways. So you get the ball reversed, just like we're looking at through the guide. You could pass and make a reversal, or you could dribble it for a reversal. That works really good against pressure. But then you're working that same kind of pattern on the other side of the court where you have that auto backdoor, the fill from behind, create the triangle, work the triangle. So it's an offense that you can hit side to side multiple times. If you're a coach that likes ball reversals, this would be a good offense to look at. But then there's a variety of ways to score. We talked a little bit about some of those already. What is your favorite feature of this 5-out up screen offense? What's been the most successful thing through the years that Lake's capitalized on?
I like a lot of things. When I had some good post players, when we could dive that first post and dump it in there and then do our split action,
Yeah,
and our post players were patient enough to let the split action happen. Now you had a one-on-one in the post. Anytime there was any diving from any defensive guards, you had an automatic kick out on it. I really like that post up option. The slip screen seems to be there a lot in your diagram, that force slipping right
yeah,
after he sets the split
yeah.
screen action for 5. We're not there yet. I really like the handoff option with the flare on the backside. And our better teams got really, really good at driving the baseline once the up screen took place. Everybody thinks it's not a driving offense, but when you've got some guys that can put it on the deck and you get a reversal with that up screen, it opens that baseline wide open. So I like every aspect of it myself. Again, you bring up one good point. I've noticed on film and when we talk to our guys, our backdoor situations really go up if we can get 3 reversals in this thing. You're going to find the bad defender. You're going to find the kid that wants to make a play and show his team that he can D it up, and he's going to get lost, and you're going to get him on the back door.
Yeah, you talked about that baseline drive opportunity, which we'll look at on film here shortly. But one of the interesting things that happens, and you can really see it on the film, is when your player vacates the low post to set this up screen, you can see a head turn from the help defender when that happens. And that's kind of the cue for that player on the wing to drive that baseline. So if you can get a half step on your guy, that baseline is just absolutely naked. and it leads to a lot of wide open layups. And even without the layups, you're getting a scrambled defense to attack and play advantage basketball. So, Coach, with this offense, do you feel like there's an opportunity to use it as kind of a tempo or delay game to try to control the game against teams that are pressuring, see how much they want to pressure? Talk to me a little bit about that element of the offense.
Oh yeah, we've used this a lot in 4-point games, not quite ready to go four corners, not looking at our stack delay that we would run, just trying to get our players to understand 3, 4, 5 reversals. Again, it takes 5 good ball handlers to have a team to be able to do that. Teams can find your weakness there also, but you get up 4, in my experiences, everybody wants to come out and deny just a little bit harder, and they're trying to make that defensive play, and it seems like that's when we get our easiest baskets in the offense.
Yeah, so we're going to pop up some film on the screen here, and this is your team running this upscreen offense. And you guys do a good job demonstrating all the different options of the offense. And this video will kind of go through it a little bit at a time here. So I'll pop that on. Let's make sure the volume's not on. What's kind of the teaching progression for this 5-out upscreen offense, Coach?
Well, the first thing we're always doing is basically 2 lines, one on the wing, one up top, and we are really stressing punching the gap. If we can't get to the elbow area, we're not going to throw the back door. You've got to get by that top defender. If we're going laterally and we're making a bounce pass from, the side and not pushing it out in front of us, don't bother making it. You're not going to get it. So we start with that action, and then we'll go into our back door, bring the guy up from the wing, and we'll go right into our up screen, catch, reverse, and then backdoor the backside. So we take it to a 4-man drill after our 2-man drill, just like you saw that action right there. Then we'll take it to 5-man drill. Then we'll take it to, what do we want to do if we don't have the up screen guy? We're going right there to the double backdoor action. And, just going over all those different looks. We've got a pass option of this so that you're not dribbling the guy through. I don't have much pass option, I don't think, on this particular film for you. But it kind of sets up a whole different set of ideas because a lot of teams started to get real passive on our wings. So we wanted to be able to get it started in a different direction. So we can pass, screen at the opposite elbow, get a split cut there, and then get the offense going back on the backside.
Yeah, so you mentioned so many different things that I wanted to touch on, and one of them is in this clip here, where typically when we're in this kind of 5-out shape, we would be dribbling at a player, and that player would go back door. But you can build in some options and some reads out of this that vary the action a little bit, and this is one of them where typically that would be a backdoor by 45, but you're going to turn this into a handoff option where he's going to come and receive the ball, and then you're going to flare that backside. So that's a great way to really stretch the defense horizontally here. And then in this next clip, I know we've watched it some already, but this is that beautiful dribble at backdoor. And the thing that I like about this backdoor is a lot of times people will run backdoor sets, and that's kind of the focal point of the set that they're running. And it's kind of like we need the backdoor or bust, or there might be one other option. But this backdoor is probably the best backdoor that just kind of naturally occurs in an offense where it's not a set play designed for a backdoor. It's just one of the options built into this kind of continuity pattern that a team would run.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about it's better to be late on your back door than it is early. If you go early, you're not going to get it. We got to really see the ball down on the dribble at you before you're going to take your backdoor cut. And I think that timing and that thought and that timing really helps our kids out.
Yeah, so we're looking at forming this triangle on the strong side, and the back side, we'd like to interchange personnel to kind of keep the weak side defense busy. But we
Exactly.
can, score off that up screen if that action works. But there's several different ways to reverse it. So we talked about being able to just dribble through. This is the pass option right into that back door. And then we'd also touched a little bit on what I called this kind of bypass, where we're bypassing the standard reversal and just going to reverse it with the dribble. So anytime somebody's denying that pass to the elbow, it's no problem at all. You can just keep the offense flowing. So a lot of times in continuity patterns, there can be sticking points where if a defense kind of takes that option away, then you're kind of stuck. But this is nice because you can reverse it through the pass or reverse it through the dribble, and it works great either way.
Yeah, these teams ran this offense pretty well. We really do try to emphasize the bounce pass. I know you saw one over the top there. That's not my favorite, but this group knew each other pretty well and figured that out and what each other's strengths were, and he could handle a pass over the top. There's the drive off the baseline, off the up screen.
Yeah.
Just a quick move and go.
And you can really you see those heads start to turn. You can see that defender on the block start to go up the lane, and when he goes up the lane, that's a great cue to drive. Talk to me about the best personnel to run this offense. I've always been intrigued by the opportunity to work multiple players in a low post situation, and you could even build a foundation of a team using multiple low post players with this offense. What kind of personnel are you looking for to run this offense the most effective way possible?
Yeah, we've had our best with, we've never been big. I don't think I've coached over a 6'4", 6'5" post. There's one right there, Spottelson twin. Being able to have posts that can handle the ball. That way you don't have to get glued into just giving them the ball on the post. I think having guards that are good passes really surprises people when we throw it to the low post area, like here. If he sits low, a lot of times we get that slip screen right there, and look at the guy on the top. He's always going to be open because they're diving. So if you got a good shooter on the top and hit low, he's working up from that backside. You're going to get that top three anytime you want it. But like you're saying here, we got 6'3", 6'4" inside, but they have good ball skills, good handling skills, good finishing skills. So it's if I had 6'8", 6'9", I don't know if this would be the thing that I ran if they were limited with their ball skills.
Yeah, this offense, I think, you need some ball handling, but the ball handling is kind of spread out. It's distributed throughout the team where you don't need like some ball handling wizard. All you need to do is have somebody initiate the offense, and then it kind of flows. So it really does create kind of, true team basketball where everybody's kind of making decisions. Everybody's handling the ball. Everybody's looking for opportunities here. What would you make a special call to feature a certain player in the post, or how would you do that if you really wanted to get one player isolated in the post, because the post up opportunities are kind of free flowing in this offense? So does it really matter just like how you would position them to start the offense where they would get an opportunity to catch it in the post, or you're just going to let that kind of play out as it comes?
I think that's more of a practice thing, Matt, as far as like we're going to talk about, my kids playing for me, but I had a lefty, Joe, that played that was really good in catching the ball in the right hand short corner. And as a lefty, he could get that ball into the middle of the lane and make a lot of good passes out of it. So like that was a part of the offense that we really wanted to facilitate when Joe was in there. Anytime he came off the up screen, we wanted to get him the ball on, we always call it the U and the A because of blue streaks on our floor. So we wanted him to slide to that A spot. And we were really big with the split screen when he was there because he was good at finding that slip or getting that kick back out of that top guy at the top. When I had Mitch Spottelson, he was a guy that we really wanted the ball on the block. He was good at letting everything clear out and then playing one-on-one in the post. So, those come down to, I think, practice situations, who we think is going to guard somebody from an opponent's standpoint and what their weakness might be. But anybody has that right or that opportunity to catch it down there. They just, that's part of our one-on-one progression, what you're going to do when you get it.
Yeah, so last question on the this 5-out upscreen offense before we move on. You guys don't just run this, you guys run a bunch of stuff, and you guys tend to be a high execution team. You don't just run a lot of different offenses, you run a lot of different offenses as well. So I guess my question to you regarding this offense is, what would steer your decision to using this offense more as opposed to like what the defense is doing? If you're seeing certain things from the defense, what would make you think this would be the play for you guys to go to?
Well, I think I've mentioned already. You brought up a great point. Everything I've watched on there in today's game, it kind of drives me crazy, and I think a lot of coaches can go with this. It's all purposeful dribbling.
Yeah.
There's so many dribbling guards and forwards that just keep the ball pounding, and the ball moves because it's purposeful dribbling. And whether you're running a motion offense or even a Euro ball screen offense, when you see teams that are dribbling with a purpose and passing with a purpose, I think you see better team basketball. But to go back to your question, I just really like aggressive denying teams. This tends to work the best. They
Yeah.
want to get after you. They want to get after the ball. They want to try to get the easy layup at the other end. And I think it gives us our advantage when we're really seeing that high level, intense, kind of in your face team that we'd be playing.
Yeah, and when you're taking that ball from one side of the court to the other, when you're bypassing the high post reversal and dribbling it across, which is what you would probably doing against a pressure defense type of team, it really is bait for the back door because that specific defender is moving from a help to deny position. So they should be in help when the high post is one pass away. As the ball crosses that high post, they move into a one pass away situation, and it really just sets it up beautifully for them coming out into the passing lane right when you're timing up that back door. Hey,
And
Coach, I'd like to. Yep, go ahead.
you've also noticed that when our guards start in one direction, there's no spin move to go the other way. You've got to attack the gap you're going to so the first guy can read it. Whether you made a mistake or not and can't get to that gap, you've got to take your first opportunity. No playing around with it between the legs, whatever that case may be, to get to the other side.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this conversation on tactics. I'd like to kind of pivot our conversation into your coaching roots here. And I guess my first question would be, what was it like for you growing up, the son of a basketball coach?
Yeah, I mean, right. I was the baby of three brothers and a sister.
Yeah.
Court in the backyard. My next brother to me is 6 years older. So by the time he was 16, wanting to go to the playgrounds, I'd be hanging around with him. Dad coaching, baby of five. It was easy for him to come home and I would hop in the car with him. I went to a million practices and probably annoyed his players half to death, but I was always in the gym. And I actually went on and played baseball at Walsh College and I played all three sports, football also in high school. And when it all shook down and I'm in college, I'm like, what do I want to do with my career? I just felt I knew basketball the best. I just felt that basketball was what my path was going to be because I always lived it. And it's definitely been a journey that I look back on and think that I've been blessed. Never went chasing the dream for a bigger job, never went chasing the dream for maybe a better athlete because I've had a ton of support administratively. There hasn't been a lot of turnover in my 29 years at Lake High School. And I've just been blessed with the roots my father gave me and my brothers playing and finding a home at Lake High School has been wonderful.
Yeah, my dad, as you're aware, coached me in high school, and he was a basketball coach in the '70s at Minerva High School, as well as Crestview, I believe, as well. But he got out of coaching when my parents started having so many kids that they couldn't afford living off of a teacher's salary at that time. So he got into business and started getting into the business world. He coached me up through just in First Friends and in AAU and things like that. But he officially got back into coaching my sophomore year of high school, going into my sophomore year of high school. So he took the job at Heritage Christian. I was at Canton Glen Oak at the time. So I took about the whole summer to deliberate whether I was going to actually even transfer to Heritage Christian, which seems wild at the time. But I did, and I'm very thankful for that experience. But I say this to kind of set you up with, I got a behind the scenes look at my dad as a basketball coach, and I got to see some of the things that went into being a basketball coach, where After the games, we would play a game. I would go into the basement and play video games or hang out with my friends. I'd pop my head back up, and he's still in the living room with one of the assistant coaches. They've taken down probably a whole pizza by themselves. They're watching game tape. They're brainstorming on a whiteboard. I got the behind the scenes look at coaching, and I'm curious what that looked like on your end.
Yeah, I never had a chance to play for my dad other than instead of AAU, it was called Operation Positive. It was an outdoor league here that was run downtown. I think that was the only time I ever had a fall that my dad coached me personally. When I was growing up, we were in Plain Township. My brothers all went to Glenwood or Glen Oak. My dad was actually coaching at Jackson for a few years at that time. Once the Jackson situation was over, he was out of coaching, honestly, for a few years. And the athletic director at Kent State Stark called, and there probably were my dad's best years as a coach at the branch, coaching those teams. He would get a lot of players that would go away to college and realize they were either homesick or it wasn't working out. And I remember the one year they went to the small school championship down in Chillicothe, Ohio. And I was really happy for him because it seemed like that was his avenue. A little bit of an older player, teaching a guy how to become a man, let alone a basketball player. And I really enjoyed going to those games. And I think I learned a lot watching him coach at that level.
So you had mentioned you had a kind of a variety of interests when you were coming up. When did you know you really wanted to be a basketball coach?
Well, that's a good question. I started to hang around a little bit as an assistant back at my school, Central Catholic, with Doug Miller as
Uh-huh.
a volunteer assistant girls coach. I want to say going into my senior year in college. And I thought that would just be a nice avenue to have on a resume as I looked into where I was going to be able to land a teaching job at. And then during my student teaching, I switched gears. I student taught at Glen Oak, and Coach Nicodemo was friends with my dad, and he let me come on as a varsity assistant there as a volunteer. And so I thought, wow, this is pretty good stuff. I'm 22 years old, 23 years old, and I've been up at the varsity level being an assistant. And then I got hired back at Central Catholic, and Doug Miller had moved from girls to boys coach. And same thing, I spent a year as the freshman coach, and then his varsity assistant stepped down, and I was able to move right into that role. And I had 5 years of really being in the trenches with a head coach, trying to make decisions at a very
Yeah.
young age, which I think helped.
Yeah. So you mentioned Doug Miller. I know he was one of your mentors, and I'd like to talk about your mentors. But I'm interested before that, what kind of a basketball player were you? I think you were maybe more of a baseball player overall, but tell me, what was your basketball game like as a young player?
Well, I look back and I feel bad now because as a sophomore, I was able to play a lot of varsity due to an injury of a senior that probably would have had a great career at Central Catholic. So a little bit of luck was involved underneath my tutelage of growing into being a player, and being able to play as a sophomore, I thought really helped me out in my high school career. I did not get the opportunity to ever play with the 3-point line, which is so weird for probably young coaches to realize that
Yeah.
didn't come into play
Yeah.
until 1987, and I graduated in '86. That was kind of my game. I was a guard. I was a perimeter oriented type of player. A lot thinner then than I am now. I wouldn't say I was very physical, but probably a creative guard when I drove. I was pretty good at driving and finding the tee up spot or finding the hammer play. And I think team basketball was really more emphasized back in that day, and I felt I was a good team player.
So did you play for Coach Miller, or did you just play baseball with him and coach basketball under him?
I actually played baseball for Coach Miller. He's a
Uh-huh.
legendary baseball coach. He coached boys basketball for 6 years, and then stuck with baseball. But yeah, I never played basketball for him. I had two different coaches when I was there, Jim Peterson and a guy by the name of Ron Stoops. The Stoops family is famous for football. Those were his brothers that coached at Oklahoma. But yeah, I never had the chance to play basketball for Doug, but I knew how he coached because I played baseball for him.
Yeah, so on the screen, we're looking at Coach Doug Miller on the right, and we're looking at Bruce Brown on the left. I know those are two big mentors for you. I'd like to hear a little bit more in depth about the influence that these guys had on you, and if there's any other mentors that you wanted to lump in, and exactly, kind of the influence they had on you.
Well, Bruce was definitely the ultimate promoter. He was a promotion coach. He really taught me, I think, how to get your program out there, get it promoted, get student sections with T-shirts on, get local communities involved. And the things he would put on paper is way beyond me. He had the time and the energy. I think everything that we ever did was down in some kind of format with a policy and a plan. His energy was relentless when it came to program and program ideals. And then for him to be our athletic director while I was the head coach, and he wasn't always easy. He'd shut the door and give me a little bit of a tongue lashing sometimes because he had pride in the program. He was there. He was a coach, but it was always with the intent to try to continue to build, to continue to keep promoting, continue to keep it going in the right direction. And I think inherently the things I learned from Bruce over those first 2 years coaching for him have stuck with me over time.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that you worked under Coach Miller for some time. What did he kind of trust you with that made you feel like you were getting real coaching experience working for him?
Our situation at Central Catholic was really weird. A lot of coaches, I think, are going to be shocked at this. We were limited to an hour and a half of gym time. We had one gym in the building, and for the programs to get through, we had an hour and a half, and that was from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. And I know many of us taper down, right? We might go 2.5 hours down to 45 minutes by the end of the year, but we had that time to get things in. And the beauty of Doug Miller was his simplicity. And I mean this in all honesty and all respect. He ran a flex offense, he ran four corners, and he ran a little bit of a 3-out, 2-in motion. But everything that was probably very simple for high school kids to be able to get. And he did an excellent job of teaching the limited things that he wanted to teach. What I thought I was able to add were some defensive concepts. We didn't do a whole lot of shell drill before I got there. We were able to put a lot of that time into that hour and a half. I was able to get him convinced that we need 15, 20 minutes of breaking down some defensive scrambles and things like that. And then as time went on, he trusted me with a few other offensive things with some teams we had. We had a player by the name of Kevin Finnerfrock, and we started to, get him convinced to put some horns and some high ball screen stuff in. And it was really, really nice to. And one thing I've tried to do with my assistants is I want to hear their ideas. I don't want them to be yes men. And I think Doug taught me that there can be, with respect of your assistants, they're going to go a lot further for you and do a lot more work for you.
Yeah, with these two guys, is there any phrases or wording or things that you say, maybe even stories that you share with your team that directly come from one of these two guys?
There's probably a lot of them. I always talk a lot about we got to play with what's behind the K on our shirt because Lake is our name. Right behind the K is our heart. I thought that was a big Bruce Brown one, always trying to really get kids to play with that extra effort, that special sense of effort. I always tell them we got to play with a lot of pop and sizzle. It sounds like a crazy, crazy phrase, but he was a little pop, pop, sizzle, sizzle. We got to go, and so those things just, yeah, they kind of stay with you. And until you bring it up, you kind of forget where the origins happened,
I wanted to kind of pivot the conversation here and talk a little bit about building the foundation for your Lake basketball program. And I guess my first question to you is kind of just tell me a little bit about this Uniontown, Lake, Hartville area. Tell me about the people. Tell me what kind of community it is. Tell me about the businesses. Give our audience kind of an overall rundown of what Hartville is like.
Yeah, I mean it's two different communities that have grown into one. You've got your Uniontown, which is pretty much west of Market. You've got your Hartville that is east of Market. And back in 1950s, the two came together. They were separate schools, which became Lake High School. And when I came in the early 90s, we had a couple players. Last name's Koblentz. And what's ironic is now I'm coaching their second generation. Their kids are all coming through now as freshmen in my program. They probably have the main business in town, which is the Hartville Marketplace, the Hartville Kitchen, and the Hartville Hardware. Their grandfather had built up these three businesses in town, and probably getting a start as an assistant with those boys being in the program and then taking them over as a head coach. Formed a very good relationship with Marion Koblentz, who runs the marketplace, one of the divisions, and he was a big basketball nut. He wanted to see basketball kind of come through in the area. Pretty persistent on we can do this in the Federal League, and I think it kind of helped having the one of the top dogs in town, I guess you could say, being in support of you, and then those boys, trusting in me and having some success early on. I've never really felt a whole lot of pressure with a down year or two that we're moving out and trying to go a new direction, because I felt we had that support from the get-go.
So you take over the Lake basketball program. What did the program look like when you took it over?
Well, it wasn't much different from Central Catholic because we had one gym.
Yeah,
And we're trying to get that gym was not even in the high school, it was in the elementary school. So we had to drive from our high school about 5, 6 minutes to the elementary school after practice or after school to practice. So in doing that, it made it very difficult to formulate a youth program. So when I took over, fortunately, we had about two guys in town that wanted to formulate a youth program. And when I say formulate a youth program, at that point it was basically just tournament teams. It
yeah.
was selecting about 8 to 10 kids and putting them in different events. There wasn't really an in-house type of program. Year three, when I took in over the job, after year three, we built a YMCA connected to the school. It's a unique situation, and I sat down with the program director for the YMCA, and for 22 years now we've been able to run, I take that back, 24 years now, we've been able to run in conjunction with our Y a program for our in-house. And I think that's really helped us bridge that gap to be better at the varsity level.
Yeah, you touched on some things that I really want to dig into a little bit deeper. But before then, I'm interested in just the standing within the Federal League. You've been coaching in the Federal League the entire time through your coaching career. I believe, the teams of the Federal League have changed through the years at times, but Lake has been one of the smaller teams in the Federal League. Has there ever been a push to do something different from a league standpoint? How has the community kind of felt about being in the Federal League? Was there kind of ebbs and flows with the relationship with the league through the years, or has it been pretty steady?
Since I have been there, there has not been a whole lot of talk of us getting out and getting into a new league. Now, the interesting part is just recently with the new divisions that have happened, we do find ourselves a much smaller level than at one point we were compared to the Division Ones. Whether or not our higher ups are talking about anything different, I don't know. I just know that our community wants to have a Stark County basis to us. And the schools that are more like we are in demographics tend to be North and Summit, or Medina County. And I think right now they'd still rather us continue to try to fight, continue to hang, continue to see what we can do in the league. And I haven't heard a whole lot of talk of getting out of it. But I could see with being down to Division III, football losing numbers a little bit with divisional play. Maybe there'll be some talk in the near future as to, are we in the right place?
So you've taken over this program, and you're putting the early elements of a youth program in to build a foundation for your program. When did you feel like things started to really turn for Lake? And I'm not talking about like when you hit your peak years, but when did you start really seeing Lake could be a sustainable basketball program?
Yeah, I thought, let's see, I took over probably what, 2002, 2003 in that area, maybe a little bit before that. And we just kept going 500. We just kept going 500. And then, I go with some of the things we've talked about, kind of instituting then in the late 2008, 9, 10 area of putting in this upscreen offense, of kind of putting a stamp on a lot of Princeton stuff, maybe a little bit sooner than most high schools even started to do some of the Princeton stuff, and starting to understand space, and getting to realize that I had really smart, coachable kids that could do these types of things. And I think that's kind of when we started to realize we could maybe take it up a notch. And then of course it took players. I mean, just the perfect group started to come through. 11, 12, 13, 14. We had length, we had shooters, we had ball handlers, we had togetherness, we had kids that ate lunch together, hung out in the classroom together. It took that aspect to really bring this to the level we had it there, starting in 2012.
Yeah, so you're over 25 years at the same place, and to me, that means the opportunity for continuity, where you can implement things and you can see them through, and they can continue to run on their own year after year. The hardest part about putting initiatives into a basketball program is launching them. They're typically easier to execute the second, the third, the fourth year when you already have a pipeline in place. So one of the things that I like to do for my basketball teams is we would do team dinners. Once a week we would go out and an establishment would feed our team, and these meals were kind of complimentary. Most of the time we would tip. Sometimes the food would be brought into our school. Sometimes we would go to a restaurant. But this was just an opportunity for us as a team to have a meal together, to have some bonding time. And doing that the first year where you're establishing all of these different relationships with different restaurants is challenging. But then the second year, you just call that same contact back from last year and they say, yeah, we're good. We'll feed your team twice this year. And it's, that easy. So I think that's kind of the opportunity where you've been at Lake for so long that you've been able to put things in place, and once they're in place, they just they run themselves. It's not that simple, but it is a lot simpler to keep things rolling over time. So tell me a little bit about some things that you've done through the years. And I know your summer shootouts or something that you take pride in. Some of the sponsorship things that you've put in place is stuff that you put pride in. But talk to me about getting those things in place and then just letting them build and compound interests over years and years.
Yeah, and the hard part being at the same place a long time is you take for granted some of these things are in place, and you got to watch you don't become stagnant. You got
Yeah.
to continue to keep pushing things forward. We are fortunate that, excuse me, we are fortunate that our parents bring food in on Thursdays during our season. We have what we call Feed the Team, and we will do after our practice on Thursdays a meal that they bring into the cafeteria. They usually set up the cafeteria nicely for us. Maintenance has been great with that. And then we'll watch film after our Feed the Team. So that's kind of a traditional thing, get our scouting report there. And our parents kind of know that's coming when we do our preseason meeting. Our preseason meeting is one where we bring in everyone seventh grade on up. We introduce the kids from each team. We have two seventh grade and two eighth grade teams. So the coach introduces the team and what he's looking forward to. And we have those parents, we call it a carry-in dinner. They bring their own food in from a local establishment, and they can, sit with other parents, and they usually are eating their dinner as we are discussing program ideals, what we are looking for, what are the no-go situations? Do not contact a coach within 24 hours of a game. We're not here for this hothead situation type of thing. And just kind of going over those bylaws and meeting the team that night. And then part of that process, then we also have each player sell about 10, $20, I don't want to say coupons, but $20 sponsorships. And on our big screen, we run the names of all the people that donated during each game all year long. And that helps cover our players' packages. Never been one for the kids to have to go out and, sell booklets to area restaurants or to, really be involved in a whole lot of fundraising, car washes, things like that. Um, and so we just kind of cover all those bases early on to get our season started and get that finances rolling there for us to be able to get them things throughout the season. And then we usually do a Christmas party each year. Ran it at my house for years. My wife's getting a little bit where it's becoming a lot, but this year we went over to a player's house, did a gift exchange, had a Christmas party. And I think those things, again, just put a human element to basketball. It's so easy for everybody to go through that grind of, you're the coach, he's the player, here's the expectations. It's 2 hours a night. And I think kids need to see that there's other sides to you, and we need to see other sides to them also.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that it's easy just because you've been at a certain place for so long, but it does have some benefits to be in that same community with the same people. Did you ever find yourself in your coaching career, maybe not as appreciating the things that you do have with your lake community and maybe coveting some of the positives of other communities that they might have going for them? Did you ever kind of start to have not necessarily a wandering eye about leaving Lake, but just looking at some of the pros of some of the other schools that you've been competing against and maybe losing the focus on the great things that Lake has to offer?
Yeah, I often wonder when we got our why involved. I think a lot of successful youth programs tend to have youth boards, and we've never really had a youth board because our Y's been running our regular leagues. So we kind of take the brunt as the coaching staff in formulating our tournament teams, and sometimes I feel that's a little off kilter there. That maybe I would have an influence on a fourth, fifth, or sixth grader making a team.
Yeah.
Not really sure that should be, my job. We've tried to filter that out a little bit, but one thing I probably wish I would have done over is figured out how to create a youth board with positions and get get a little less involved from third grade on up. I think sometimes it's taken me away from my focus of my team because those things are all during the season. Um, I've had some years where I probably didn't give enough respect to my middle school staff. We had a run of about 15 years having the same middle school staff, and you just get kind of spoiled that they know what you're running and what you want out of your expectations with them.
Yeah.
They did a great job of watering down what we do, and now we're back in that phase with seventh, eighth, and ninth grade where I'm retraining some coaches here. Um, and that just takes time. Some of them are more willing to dive in and want to do what you're doing, and some have their own ideas that they think are going to fit with their team. And I think it's really hard to find middle school coaches that are dedicated. I'm not saying we really have dedicated guys. They're there working with the kids, but it just seemed like it's harder to infiltrate your program to new coaches when you already had a group there that kind of knew what it was. You forget over time how much you spent with them to get things rolling like we did. So I think we're back in that process again and training some middle school guys.
Yeah, and what really perked my ears up in that answer that you just gave was this idea of vertical alignment in your basketball program, where you're talking about your middle school coaches being able to kind of seamlessly implement the precursors to your varsity system. And I remember this when I first got to Glen Oak and I started to understand kind of the lay of the land of the Federal League. And, I'm watching your Lake teams play, but it's your freshmen, and I could basically get my notepad out and I could get a pretty good scout of your varsity team based on the things that your freshmen were doing, because your freshmen would call out Buffalo and you guys would run your Euro ball screen offense just like your varsity would. So I guess tell me a little bit about this, vertical alignment in your basketball program, where you've got not only your plays, the precursors to your varsity plays being implemented at the lower levels, but also the same verbiage used at the different levels. So players are gaining specific knowledge, specific skills at different levels of the program, and they're able to transfer those to being more of a varsity ready basketball player by the time it's, you get them.
Yeah, so we tried, or we try to use read and react basketball with our youth kids. We buy each one of the coaches film for read and react. We get each one of the coaches the round circular disc, and we're trying to teach from 4th through 6th grade read and react open post offense. It was driving me nuts that 4th, 5th, 6th grade coaches were running all ball screen for their best player. I think it's a trend everywhere, right? They want to win, they want to have success. So trying to train them to do read and react, I thought was very important. And then once we got into 7th and 8th grade, we were trying to implement some of the basic things that we want to run at the varsity level, especially press breaker. Want kids to know press breaker by the time they get into the high school level. We spent a lot of time 7th and 8th grade with our 1-up and our 2-up series and some of the special hits there. And then we kind of look at the teams, and like you said, if we had a Euro ball screen type of team with some bigs to survive, we would put in Euro ball screen. We try to get everybody to run the 5-up continuity, or what we call 1-2-2 offense. And from there, I let coaches pick a few things that they want to do. The cross screen down screen's huge in middle school basketball. You can always catch somebody on the block with a cross screen or a little power play. So I allow those guys to do that. But as long as they can get the Euro ball screen in, as long as they can get some motion concepts, and then if we can get our 1-2-2 in 7th and 8th grade, I'm pretty happy with where we're going to go come 9th grade.
Yeah, I remember early in my coaching career, I'd switched to running the circle motion offense, and I was building out a practice plan my second year running it. And I'd kind of referred back to the practice plan from last year. And I said, okay, our offensive install on day one was 30 minutes long. So I, blocked off 30 minutes to work on circle motion offense in our, first practice of year 2 of running it. And we were like 7 minutes into the section of learning circle motion offense, and we had mastered all the elements that I wanted to cover. And that's what we're really talking about here, is when you put players on a progression where they can learn things in stages as they go up through your program, you get players that are very ready to run your system right away. So we've kind of talked about, Coach, you're taking over Lake High School, the basketball program. You're building the foundation. You've implemented some of these program building tactics. I'd like to get into kind of your peak years, but before we do that, I'd kind of want to establish, what do you consider your coaching identity? What kind of defines a Tom McBride basketball team?
I think discipline, a team that's not going to quit. I think a team that is going to play hard. I think we get a lot of teams on paper that come in and their coaches prepare their players to be cautious. We've been upset minded in the past, and gritty. I think that we definitely want to have a team that is going to be in a program that shows heart and grittiness. And I think we've accomplished that over the years.
When I think of your teams, I think of execution. And I wanted to go over some clips that I found that I thought were really good execution. And, just talk to me a little bit about the details. How do you get your teams to execute the details so well when you're running these plays? We've got a blind pig backdoor. I think there's several plays on here, but this all requires attention to detail. This all requires, very good execution. How do you get your teams to that state?
Well, I think number one, that especially when I run a lot of sets, there's a portion in every practice that I'm doing what's called cycle sets. And so I call out the 4 sets, and I'll just call them out. We're going up here, down there, we're going into Carolina, and then we're going to go into, 1-2-2, whatever the case may be. And we throw the ball up at the basket, or the kids throw the ball up. And when I say rebound, we outlet, and we seamlessly have to go through that. We do a lot of 5-on-0 cycle sets. get everybody through, new group on, new group on. And I think that's been a great way for us in an 8-9 minute time period to cycle through everything we want to see. And what's amazing is 5-on-0, when you're doing that at that speed, you can find the guys that don't really know exactly what they're doing. And then we make everybody play each other's spots so that you know what all 5 guys on the floor are going to do. Other than that, it's just repetition, trying to get the defense, JV defense, whatever it would be, to play like the other team's going to play, not just how, they want to play. Here's what we're going to see: overplay. We're going to see a soft team here. We're going to see a switching team here, whatever that case may be. But yes, it's all about execution, perfect execution. And I just don't let it die until we get it. As you can see, a lot of these things have a lot of timing issues with them, and it consistently needs to be worked on in practice for that to happen, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about 5-on-0. I'm a proponent of 5-on-0. There's currently kind of an underground war on doing on-air drills with your basketball team. Everybody's got an opinion how everybody else should coach their basketball team. I've certainly found, 5-on-0 offensive reps. I don't know that has to be the mainstay of how you work on your plays, but there's certainly a time and a place for it. I like to work it into kind of a warm-up section of practice where I typically would use the first 15 minutes of a practice as non-contact. So that might be fundamentals drills, it might be shooting drills, or it might be just like, 5-on-0 on air running your offense to learn your plays. So I don't relate to that school of thought where, you're not coaching right if you're doing things 5-on-0 or on air. Yeah, talk to me a little bit about when players struggle with execution. Is it just about reps? Have you had players that just can't seem to pick up the scope of your offense since you're running a lot of different things? And how do you handle that, getting them up to speed so they're ready to execute in games to the level of your standard?
Yeah, I don't think the last 2 years we've had teams that executed extremely well, and that's on me a little bit, but it's also on a little bit of basketball IQ from the players in. I think we kind of know where to go, but maybe not necessarily the objective or the speed that we need to play off the ball. None of these things that you're watching can happen if you're not moving without the basketball at the same speed you would if you have it. Um, so when we do go to our 5-on-5, I do a lot of just one offense, 8 minutes on the clock, and we are continually drilling the execution of that particular offense. So here we're dealing with some high level IQ teams that I could run a lot with. Last couple of years, we've really had to water some things down and run our basic actions. What was nice this year is I did play 2 sophomores and a freshman, so I think we can get a little deeper in our development of what we want to run the next couple of years.
Yeah, what I really liked in terms of refining execution was implementing constraints in practices. And here we're looking at, this is Buffalo, which I was talking about earlier. So, you've been running this Euro ball screen offense at the high school level for years and years, but this is basically an Iverson entry into the Euro ball screen offense. You can see the basic pattern of it there. And then this is my favorite feature of the offense is you're running that 2-man game. Anytime that baseline is open, I ran this offense for 5 years with my Aquinas teams, 4 years with my Aquinas teams. I would tell them, take that baseline reject every single time because you might not get a layup like we're watching here on film, but you've got a completely collapsed defense, similar to that, 5-out up screen, 1-2-2 concept where when you get that baseline drive, if you don't get the layup, you've got a flood of help that you can work off to play advantage basketball with. But before I got sidetracked on Buffalo, when you're working on your plays 5-on-5, adding constraints where you're really dictating to your players which options that they look at, because sometimes in practice, you've got your A team going against your B team, or you've got your varsity going against your JV. They can score any which way you want. But when you use constraints to kind of force them to look at different options, that's when you kind of get unlocks where teams aren't just practicing the first option because they can get that against the JV team, but they're starting to see the second and third option and how things evolve past that. And you can really control that as a coach. You can really dictate that just by using some constraints in practices. So is that something you might use in practice, Coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, each one of these things, other than the Euro ball screen, we were really looking for a specific situation here on that Euro ball screen. I mean, that is a Division III All-American at Mount Union that just went baseline. So it's nice when you have players like that that can make those reads quickly without a whole lot of situational practice. He had extreme passion for the game and good basketball knowledge. But yes, going back to a lot of those things that you were seeing that were running, we did have a specific hit that we were looking for. And then, yes, constraining into what do we want for the second option, the third option, and then what are we going to do from there? Do we go into more continuity? If we don't get any of those, that's just, different packages that we throw out there for sets roll into different continuities that we have. Something might lead into the 1-2-2 or the upscreen offense, or it might lead into our Buffalo, or it might lead into our motion, whatever the case may be. But they kind of know which sets are going to flow into which offense if it breaks down.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of transition here. You had a nice stretch of years in the 2010s where you had 5 consecutive years where you won 16 or more games. Talk to me about, kind of set the stage for how you guys kind of hit your stride there and had that nice run of teams and players.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's something that I don't know if we really saw coming. When you're coaching and you hear a lot of guys, oh, we got a really good 7th grade group, and we got a really good 8th grade group. I mean, this particular group won 3 games, with a very good coach in 7th grade, and scratched the surface with about 5 games in 8th grade. But the pieces and parts were there. Like we said, we had 2 different teams at each of those levels. And when they started to come together in 9th grade, um, it just in 13, 14, by the time they became juniors and seniors, was just a group that played real well together. And then we mixed in a young man that was homeschooled that decided to come to Lake, and almost didn't play after his freshman year because he didn't see the court much. His name was Caleb Peach, and he became just a stalwart for us inside. Not that he was big and physical or anything like that. Um, the leader of that group, Mitch Spottelson, he's in the upper right-hand corner there. He just was the ultimate leader. He was there as a guy that you walk in the locker room and he would be like, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to stand for something. And when you have a leader like that controls the locker room, there's so few things you have to do as a coach. And we always talked about, we never had a bad practice in 13 or 14, which is just unheard of and uncanny. And then losing in the regional finals was just, I mean, that was a team that are just really hurt because they were so dedicated to get to that point. And I think that fed on for 6 years, just kind of seeing that. And then, we all have our COVID stories. We just seem to kind of lose a little bit of that overall momentum during that time period. And I think we're trying to get that back now.
So we're looking at some high profile players that you've coached. We've got Jake Moranville, who I coached against, Eric Koblentz, Vaudrin Spottelson, Katzenheiser. What's his last name?
Kassenheiser, just Casen, yeah.
Kassenheiser. So fill the audience in on kind of the career trajectory of these gentlemen, what they accomplished maybe at Lake, where they went on to play. And if there's anybody that I left off the screen, this wasn't an exhaustive search. These were mostly the guys that I remember that I could grab pictures of. But talk about some of the higher profile players that you've had come through your program.
Yes, when I first started, the guy in the middle, Eric Koblentz, his brother Seth Koblentz played for us. He walked on at Kent State and actually was on the roster at Kent State for a year or two, and then transferred to Malone. And then Eric comes up through, and he gets an opportunity with Keith Dambrod at Akron U, and the same type of thing. After Eric probably played a little more at Akron U than Seth did at Kent, but kind of seeing the talent that was continuing to come in at that level, Eric made the decision to go to Malone. I think he was a D2 All-American candidate, probably the best shooter that I've had overall in the program as far as advantageous shots. There was a year we won 8 games, either in overtime or at the buzzer, that Eric hit the shot. So out of 20 games to win 8 of them at the buzzer was pretty amazing. He definitely was a clutch player for us. Jake Moranville to his left with the knee brace on there, or to our left as you're looking at the screen. He went on and played in Florida. I can't remember the school, but they actually won the Division
Nova
Two.
Southeast.
Yeah, they won the Division II national championship when Jake was down there. He played about 12 minutes a night, filled a role really well as a point guard, and did a great job there. Mitch Spottelson to the right with the basketball between his hands went on to a great career at Malone. He's the head coach at Green High School right now. And I say this, out of all the guys, he was the complete package. Um, I mean, talk about a guy that lived by the 3 at Malone, but wasn't allowed to shoot it for me because he could be an inside presence. He still gives me a hard time about that, but he just understood what it took to win, understood what leadership was. And then our most success story, Chandler Vodren played point guard for me as a sophomore. The beauty in him is he ended up about 6'7", playing point guard, was an elite passer. Unfortunately for Chandler, he did not have the greatest shot in the world, but he played 2 years at Winthrop, made it to the NCAA tournament. DJ Burns was on their team that many remember from NC State. Chandler went on and did have a year with the G League Cavaliers. Unfortunately for him, he ended up with a knee injury and is no longer playing. And then Chance Kassenheiser's at Mount Union and was an All-American this year at the Division III level, and has really had a nice career there. So I think you pretty much picked 5 doggone good players that I've had the opportunity to coach, and they all stay in touch, and really proud of each one of them, all very successful.
So Chance in the bottom right, he's still playing his college career. I think he was Mount Union's leading scorer this past season. Vodren, who's the bottom left, he kind of reminded me of like a Ben Simmons type of player where he could handle the ball, but he was big. He wasn't really an outside shooter. So you did a lot of interesting things with him using his unique skill set. Koblentz in the middle, he was a 20-plus point per game scorer, I believe. Spottelson on the right, he was a Federal League Player of the Year, I believe. And then Jake Moranville, who I coached against when you had him. He's kind of a combo guard, and I can remember several games coaching against you where I felt like Jake Moranville just made more plays than anybody else to win you guys a game. He was a very gritty player, and I can remember you using him in a kind of baseline runner setup where you would put him on the baseline. He was weaving through, screens on the baseline, and you would not only burn us with Moranville coming off screens to catch and shoot or catch and make plays, but then you're, using your screeners on the baseline to flash and hurting us in a variety of ways. Talk to me about the different ways that you use these different players to feature them with their skill sets within your offensive system. Koblentz, more of a scorer. Spottelson, post player. Vodren, all-around kind of guy. Chance is a big-time shooter. Talk to me about the different ways you use these different guys.
Yeah, Jake Moranville with the knee brace on was our attack guard. We were doing a lot of things where Jake could get down into the rim. A lot of ball screen type action. Like you said, we would move him to the wing. A lot of double screen situations on the baseline because he was a good catch and rip guy. He knew how to get paint. He was excellent at getting 2 feet in the paint and playing off two, finding post players off help. We used him a lot just to really get the ball into the paint area to cause havoc on the defense. In the middle there, big picture, Eric, we were set oriented for Eric. We were trying to get Eric a lot of threes. He was a catch and shoot guy. He was tremendous at it. And we just did a lot of things, as I recall, with using him as a screener, coming off a screen, screen to screener type activities, a lot of flare action for him because once his feet were set, he was in good position. Mitch, again, was a lot of inside stuff. I ran a lot of 3 out, 2 in, where he'd screen across, pop back. He had a good elbow jumper. He could finish on the block. He was creative inside. We did a lot more power basketball when Mitch was in there, along with a lot of the Princeton stuff. So Mitch and Chandler, the one with the Winthrop shirt on, they played together when we really started to have some success. And the beauty of Chandler, like you said, was so all around that we could run about anything with him. And because of his size, he was long in getting to the basket. You know, those guys that just finish right at the rim. He was one of those. And so we could get creative on how we wanted to get him the ball, what we wanted him to do. But mostly he was a 6-8 point a night guy, but an elite passer, top assist getter for sure in our entire program. And then uh Chance Chance was a scorer. We had to use him in a way to score. We had to give him a little more freedom. Elite jump shot, hard to teach anymore. He could stop and pop on a dime. Became a much better 3-point shooter as time gone on. Thing that really hurt us with Chance is he broke his foot preseason of his senior year, and he missed the first 10 games. And I thought we had him in a real good position to possibly be player of the year in the league. And he was really becoming a good teammate and starting to learn some leadership things as a senior. And it's definitely carried on. And hopefully some of the things that we did with him at Lake helped him have his career he's had at Mount Union.
Yeah, so you've coached some nice players through the years. But my question to you is, aside from talent, aside from having these guys, what has kind of separated your good teams from your great teams through the years?
Well, I go back to what we've been talking about, the desire to play together, the desire to execute, and seeing that the trust that we place in them, or the trust they placed in us as coaches, that they believed in what we were running and they were on that same path as us, that same mind wavelength during the game. You just have some teams that it's like, how did they just do that? We went over it all week long in practice. What did they not understand? These guys all knew what coach wanted and how it needed to be perfected for us to have success. And that continuity to me with those teams and these guys being the leaders of those teams is what made them elite.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of pivot the conversation here. And we had talked a little bit earlier about, Lake's kind of positioning within the Federal League. And you've got teams like Jackson, who's won multiple state championships, huge population base, tremendous resources. You've got teams like McKinley, a city school that has tremendous history. You've got other schools, Jackson, Green, you've got Perry, you've got Hoover, you've got Glen Oak, and Lake's in there. So you're going to be facing against some of the top teams in the state year in and year out. And you're going to be facing them in your conference. So you've kind of got to develop a good strategy to win as an underdog, because you're not going to have, more athlete than McKinley any year. You're not going to have more students to draw from than Jackson any year. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, trying to compete as an underdog in these games, trying to pull these big upsets. I know you've had some real big upsets in your career. What do you think is the overall strategy or philosophy behind beating teams that are better than you or have more than you?
Well, I think it's belief. I mean, it's the cards we were dealt. It's the league we're in. We've got to find a way to fight in that league. We're not gonna just sit back and let people take advantage of us. I think it's just that consistent message that we can do this. We run good enough stuff. You guys are good enough players. You're smart enough. You believe in each other. I just think it's convincing again that the execution is what is needed. They want to overplay, then we can beat them on the overplay. They want to sit soft, they want to switch screens, we can slip screens, and just consistently going over the things that are needed on a week-to-week basis to have success and getting our guys to believe that, yeah, we're going to be right there ready to go.
One of the things that you've mastered is the ability to kind of control the tempo of a game to put yourself in a position to win a game. Ultimately, as a coach, we can't control Mr. Made shots. You can have the best game plan as a coach, and if you go out there and your kids can't hit the broadside of a barn from the 3-point line, it's going to be tough to pull that upset. It certainly helps if they believe, but creating a tempo for a game and especially being able to isolate key moments in a game where you can really dictate the tempo, I think is something that you've done really, really well in your coaching career. I've been a victim of it a time or two. But one of these concepts that you're able to do this with is this sideline delay. And I wanted to take a look at that on film and talk to you a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish, because a lot of teams use tempo control strategies. And this is a unique one where a lot of teams are using more of a four corners look, I think would be some of the most common one. The one that I used most in my coaching career was just kind of a 5-out high and wide pass and cut. A lot of teams will use like stacks at the elbow where they'll dribble a player out and pop a player towards half court, and they'll keep running that cycle until they can get a slip or a sideline drive. But talk to me a little bit about this sideline delay. Where did it come from and how do you deploy it so successfully?
Yeah, this is one of my dad's creations. I shouldn't say creations. I think back, he would tell me when Lincoln High School played in Canton, so we're dating the 1950s, early 60s here, that they had a coach that ran this almost exclusively as an offense. And then when he was at the Kent Stark, he ran this quite a bit with a couple teams that he had that had some really good penetrators from this right wing. And so just kind of stealing that offense from my dad. It's a, 75-year-old offense that we still get good things out of. We're just trying to always move that stack, and you got to drive it right here to formulate the help. We kind of have our, should I say, least proficient player right there in what we call the dummy spot. I hate to use that term, but that's what we call it. And we're just really trying to get that disadvantage on the wing or get that disadvantage in the middle. And once you have it, you're going to draw help. You're going to have some open players somewhere. So we're either getting to the rim or we're kicking out, and just like you said, controlling tempo with it. There's Cam Horning going in there after he gets a step on his guy. He should be taking the ball all the way down the baseline and bringing it back, really getting his guy moving. He didn't do a great job here. Here he's going to bring it back. So, that just sets the tempo for the stack to keep coming. Stack man doesn't get it. He's got to go right away. Cam makes a tough shot there going back. So we are really isolating one side of the floor. We are really trying to drive gaps in here. And depending on if that low guy is a good shooter or not, he's got that ability to hang out on the three on the backhand side. They're doing a really bad job in the stack. They're supposed to be closer, on the top guy's butt, and be ready to come a little bit quicker on that. Right there, number 25, he can't get in the way of that driver. We got to get right back through the elbow and back into the stack. So yeah, it's just another little gimmick, another little thing that we've had a lot of success with. That I got that one from my dad, so it's been hanging around in my mind for 30 years of coaching.
I appreciate that you didn't point out that one of the teams that you were dicing up in these clips was a team that I was coaching at the time. I remember being frustrated with guarding this offense. And what we would do is we would try to flip to a 1-3-1 on the fly, which we were actually pretty good at, where I'd just give a hand sign and they would all of a sudden, you're standing out at half court with the ball. We'd flip to a 1-3-1 half court trap. And that didn't work much better against you, but we didn't have to chase you around as much in the 1-3-1. And we got you to do something a little bit faster than if we would die a slow death with this offense. But the interesting thing here is, you're really giving your players just kind of that one option. You got that one side of the court, but the reads are very clear if you can get space and drive on that right-hand side, where you've got one player kind of helping towards the rim, and there's kind of a clear read on with your spacing where the ball should go from there. So you scored a lot driving this baseline, but you'd also draw help and throw the ball to the corner. And then worst of all, if you got to the rim and there wasn't a clear read, you would just pull it out and do it all again and run more clock. So talk to me a little bit about your thought process in deploying this in a game. Ideally, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, you're up 6 or 8 points and you're putting the team, your opponent, in kind of a torture chamber with this. What would the thought process be behind you to go to something like this?
Well, number one, we'll do it within the natural flow, not just late in the game, for the purpose of, we've all had those situations where our offense just is stagnant. It's not running effectively. It looks bad. Somebody's taking you out of what you want to do. And so it kind of gives us a deep breath. You know, you get a couple seconds here to think. The players know exactly what you want them to do. And so we will do this within the flow. But yes, if I'm up, four corners for us, I don't know. We just never seem to do a good job of reading it. Of help seems to come. We put the ball on the ground too fast, and we probably don't work enough on it. So this is what we spend more time working on whenever we do our rush drill full court. We're always working on our spacing situations, and this is one that we work on. So definitely up 6, up 8. You're going to get fouled. You're going to go to the free throw line. If you don't score the layup, we're looking for the layup specifically. More in the flow of the game. I'm okay with the kick out 3 situation, depending on who has it. But yeah, I'd say it's more to ice a game, more not than anything else.
So sticking with this concept of competing as an underdog, let's switch sides of the ball here. And I know that you're a proponent, just like I am, of a 1-3-1 half court trap. So we'll roll some clips of your team executing this 1-3-1 half court trap against Perry, and talk to me a little bit about how this might fit into competing as an underdog.
Yeah, you can see here that we're a little more laney on the top, and then we would look to trap in the corners. For me, I always felt we had to have a guy on the baseline that understood how to stay head up on the ball and be able to get to the corners and have the passion and desire to run from side to side. If you don't have a low guy that's effective in the 1-3-1, I think it's just very useless. I think it's very hard to play with. Here you see we got a team going extremely east and west on this, which really helps us drop and get to
Yeah.
it. Skip pass, we're playing single on the wing. We're not really looking to trap, but you can see we get to the corners pretty hard. Um, yeah, just a tempo changer, right? I mean, you can see already they've passed the ball 6, 7 times. They were probably taking it down our neck air a little bit and man to man, and 4 quick points there just changes the momentum of the game, changes the flow of the game. So not something we live with the entire contest, but something that we can, I think, go to for change. I think eventually teams break it down. They find the gaps, after playing with it a little bit, against it a little bit. But it's always been a nice little game changer for us with the right personnel.
Yeah, so we're looking at the same kind of 2 clips of your 1-3-1, but interestingly enough, fitting this into a game plan of trying to compete as an underdog is that the 1-3-1 is kind of a gimmicky defense in a sense, where it's not going to be your base defense. It's going to be something that you throw out there and kind of see what happens with the other team. And sometimes what happens with the other team is they're kind of completely clueless on how to approach it. So when you find situations like that, you can, tuck the defense away and bring it back later in the game. You can ride it a little bit harder and see if you can pull some more steals out with it. But I think it fits something where, if you're trying to compete as an underdog, you have a change up in your back pocket that you can kind of see how a team reacts to. And if they react to it well, you can tuck it away. If they don't react to it well, then you have another card to play, trying to compete and win a game against a team that might have more talent than you. Any closing thoughts on the 1-3-1 before we transition here, Coach?
Yeah, the nice thing about 1-3-1 is where the other teams are going to get their shots from. Are they great corner shooters? You might not want to run it. That's going to be a hot spot in your elbow areas if you're not getting back out there. So the one thing I do like about it is where your opponent's shots are coming from. There's not too many people that do anything that crazy that they're going to lob you on a 1-3-1, or they're going to be able to kill you on a double block situation. So that's one thing I know. It kind of dictates where the other team's going to shoot the basketball.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of pivot into, one more concept against as competing as kind of an underdog and trying to win games if you've got a little less material than the other team. And one of that concept would be having some special plays in your back pocket that you can go to steal your team a bucket. If you're trying to win a close game against a team that's really good, being able to steal 4, 6, or 8 points on a baseline out of bounds, an ATO, that becomes a really, really big deal. So I think this is another thing where you've kind of, mastered some of these situations, and we'll look at some on film here. But what we're really looking at is this spin pivot backdoor, and I don't want to limit our conversation to just the spin pivot backdoor. But we could talk about the spin pivot backdoor and just any kind of thoughts on trying to steal your team cheap buckets to keep you in a game, keep you within striking distance, or to put your team over the top if you're trying to pull off an upset.
Yeah, there's no question that's been something that's been very good for us to try to steal a couple points during a game. Here you see Nico go there and hits Jimmy. Jimmy was a good shooter for us, so everybody's really concerned about him coming out for the shot. I forgot we even did this out of under outs. So I'm gonna put that back in. That's pretty good. Um, Jeremy here on the wing does a good job of setting. It's all about setting up, right? Calling for the ball, making a defender feel like he's got to get there. We try to use verbal call on that real quick so that yeah, I'm there. We try to tighten up to the ball handler so it's not too wide of a pass and get straight down the lane on it. I'm big on side out of bounds plays. We're going to have a lob in there for a late game situation. We're going to have, misdirection. We're going to have a fake double back or fake double screen into a back screen situation across the floor. I totally agree with you. Those are coaching moments that I think in these special situations we've got to give our kids a chance to get a cheapie as a special set out of and out of bounds.
Yeah, and the one that you didn't mention, which I think your teams have been excellent with, is slips. You've got some really good slips that happen naturally in the offenses that you run, but you've also got some designed slip set plays that you're able to go to, and I think that would fit perfectly into this category of trying to steal your team a bucket. And what I'm talking about with stealing your team a bucket is from the sidelines you're able to make a play call, and with a little bit of execution you're able to get a really high efficiency shot. Typically with base offenses, if somebody's just running a motion offense, it can be a grind at times to find points. And if you're able to have some of these play calls that your kids can execute and you can just get a layup or get a lob or get something easy and quickly, I think that goes a long way in being able to pull an upset. The interesting thing about this film that we're watching here is, your guys are getting into this in a lot of different ways, where you've got the sideline, you've got the baseline, you've got it as an ATO, and you're not going to be able to run this spin pivot backdoor 5 times a game and steal 5 layups. But you can definitely get at least 1 per game. And you might have to be a little bit stealth when they call it, because when you execute like this, the opposing coach, when they're scouting you, they're taking a lot of notes. They're not wanting to give up this action. So I think pairing it with some concepts that might develop the same way, but having options that evolve out of it can stretch a concept like this out even more. What's the most amount of spin pivot backdoor layups you think you've ever gotten in one single game?
Oh gosh, we've gotten 4 or 5 in a game before. I can kind of remember. I'm trying to think who it was. It's funny you brought that up because I think it was Luke Conley, who's at Canton South now as the head coach, was like, I can't believe we got that 5 times against them. And it's like, okay, I don't know why, but we just kept running it and they kept biting on it. But it's like you said, once we get it out of a side out, we'd get it in regular action, we'd get it in an under out. So we were doing it from different ways. And now we've done some different backdoor stuff out of some chin action, and we're trying to get some other actions in which we're getting some backdoor situations in. But it takes a setup. It takes the kids to understand what the situation is. It takes timing on the spin. And those teams ran that stuff excellently. So that was fun to watch.
Yeah, so let's kind of move the conversation here. And what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is, you've coached your sons. You coached both of them in basketball, I believe. Joe was more of a basketball player. Jake more of a golfer. What was it like coaching your sons?
Yeah, it was a unique experience. Jake didn't play a whole lot for us. He was a little bigger, thicker in high school than he is in that picture. Golf was definitely his forte. He went on to NC State and then played mini tours and actually played in a Corn Ferry event. He's currently coaching golf at Catawba University in North Carolina and is getting married this June. So that's going to be fun for him. He's 30 years old now. And Jake was a great screener, a great teammate. But yes, he would come home many a nights, and I know he would be down, and my wife would tell me that he would just kind of have that look on his face, and she would say, "Was Dad being a jerk today at practice?" And he would go, "Yep, definitely." And she would say, "Hey, he's just trying to make the team better. You got to understand that." And she's, if it's not for her, right? Let's all, anyone that's been in coaching, if you've been in as long as I have, it goes back to your spouse and the support that she's given you. But she definitely took care of Jake too, and he would come home and be upset. And then, like you said, when it came to basketball knowledge and prowess and understanding the game and knowing what Dad wanted, but yet liked by his teammates, it wasn't oh, you're the coach's kid. Joe has a unique personality that he gets along with a lot of people. He was a good leader.
Yeah.
Never looked at me as dad, looked at himself as a player for Lake that wanted to have pride in it. And that was probably my most overachieving team. We were not big or strong by any means, and got beat in a regional semi and won two districts with him junior senior year. And those were some special years because they were definitely just an average basketball team that did more than anyone thought they could.
Did you find yourself coaching Joe harder since he was one of your main guys?
I didn't have to. I remember even as a sophomore, we were having a team meeting, and not very often does a sophomore speak up at a team meeting. And he didn't say, "Hey, my dad wanted me to do this," because I didn't. I mean, he just spoke up and said, "We're not playing the way we need to play. You guys are better than what you're doing." And it was just kind of like, "Where's this coming from?" Um, it's kind of funny. Joe talks to me a lot more now than he did growing up. He was kind of more of my wife's son than maybe my son, I should say. I don't mean that in a rude way. But yeah, he played basketball. He didn't look at this as a dad son thing. He didn't want any favors, and he didn't get any either. He had to play his part to have the success, and bring his teammates along with it.
When did you realize Jake was elite at the sport of golf?
When he was 13, it really started to take off. He had come in a top five in an AJGA event. Sophomore year, I think he had the best average ever at Lake High School. He was like 68 average as a sophomore. He was really starting to get some prowess in town, and then junior senior year just really took off at the national level. Had some invites to top 45 player events and things like that. And went on, had a great college career. He really did. Unfortunately for him, his coach retired when Jake was done, and the coach had been there 42 years. And within 6 months, rest in peace, his coach passed away of a heart attack. And I think that kind of hurt because those coaches are the ones that kind of connect you to the pro world a little bit. And a
Yeah.
whole new regime came in at NC State, and there wasn't much follow up with the alumni. So a lot of what he tried to do after was on his own accord. We had some sponsors. I'd like to thank them definitely publicly if they're listening. And then that dreaded COVID hit, which took a whole year away from South America for him. And I just don't think the recovery ever happened at the level he needed it to continue to play at the pro level. And being a school teacher, I couldn't take out any more loans.
You're an avid golfer. Tell me what it's like to be able to share the sport of golf with your son. How has that, built your guys' relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably why Joe, the one on the right, spent a lot more time with his mom growing up because, golf takes a long time, and we spent a lot of time at the course and a lot of time at tournaments. And it was great to see a little mini me fall in love with it and try to emulate. And like I said, when he got 13, came home and was grinning ear to ear because he finally beat me. I don't know if I beat him since. He's still extremely talented, and what came home and hadn't played in a tournament in a year and was third in the Ohio Open last year. And 3 years ago, he beat a guy by the name of Justin Lauer in a playoff who's on the PGA Tour to win the Ohio Open. So, it's still in there. I hope he gets the opportunity to maybe compete again. I think he misses it. And once this wedding's over, I'd like to see him maybe find a few opportunities to see if it's still in there competition wise.
So continuing on with this kind of family theme as we go through, I know you'd mentioned a little bit about the support of your wife. You've been coaching for a long time. You've coached two sons through your basketball program. Tell me something unique that she does to show support for your coaching career, whether it's, the pack you the same sandwich on game day or send you a note or something like that. What's something she does to show support for what you've been doing?
No, she's pretty good. What one thing I would say on game night, she kind of stays away beforehand. I'm fortunate that I've got some time to come home and I've got a little ritual routine myself that I kind of like to lay down and try to get myself in that frame of mind of how I think the game's going to go, what my calls might be, reviewing mentally, I guess a little just relaxation and she kind of stays away during that time period. But I think more than anything, she played herself at Lordstown High School. She gets it. She's very good at being an assistant coach at home too. Like, not here's what I see, why didn't you run this, but who seems to be giving a lot of effort, who seems to be in tune with things. She just has a real good read on what the program needs or what she thinks is lacking or what we're missing, and has a really good sense of going through all that with me.
So switching gears from family, I'd like to mix in kind of your coaching tree or extended family. Talk to me a little bit about what your coaching tree means to you, and give us kind of a rundown of where the different assistant coaches and players that you've had have done with their own coaching careers.
Yeah, when I first came on, we were fortunate to hire a guy by the name of Brian Delap, who had done some coaching down in Lincolnton, North Carolina. Brian also played at Camp McKinley High School, and he came on as my assistant first year when I took the job. And Brian has since gone on and had a stint at Malone as an assistant. He's back now at Green with Mitch Spottelson, who had coached with me as one of his assistants. They're next door neighbors, so they've got a unique relationship. From Brian, I had a young man by the name of Scott Cassie who helped us out. I think Scott just took a superintendent's job over towards Youngstown, so I'm very happy that he took his lead professionally in leading school districts and school systems. There on the right is Greg Bright. Greg Bright is the head coach at Lake Center Christian. It's our Christian school in town. Does an excellent job. Behind him with his head sticking up was our former really good player, Mitch Spottelson, who's at Green High School. Assistant of mine by the name of Luke Conley is the head coach at Canton South High School. Luke and Mitch and I just actually went out over spring break and sat down and talked about our seasons and directions in the past. So we still have a great relationship. I sat down, had coffee with Greg Bright the other night. I'd like to mention Aaron Hinkle. I think a lot of the defensive things that I've done, Coach Hinkle taught me. He was at Talmadge at one point, also at Lake Center Christian, was my assistant for a while. He's got 4 or 5 children, so he's out of the game right now. Still helps with our 8th grade in the summer when our coach can't be there. So he puts in a little bit of time. And fortunately for me, it sounds like a lot of guys, but most of those guys stayed for a lot of years. They weren't one and done. They weren't looking to get out. And that's kind of the consistent path. I think everyone that's been an assistant for me has gone on and stayed in the game or become a head coach somewhere else after leaving. So I'm very proud of that for sure.
Yeah, my coaching tree does not quite look like yours, but I do have some coaches out there that I've influenced. And when I go, watch the East Canton Hornets and Coach McGonigal is running the Slice series, or he's using the same verbiage that I use, the Slice series, which I stole from Coach Pato, who Coach Pato stole it from Coach Montgomery, and now he's using it. That makes me feel some kind of way. I like that. Talk to me a little bit about, the maybe a small element that you see in a, Luke Conley's system or Greg Bright's system that, came directly from you, and how that's kind of, spreading over time and through the years based on your impact.
Yeah, it's funny because that's what they just talked about. Luke said, hey, we're struggling with this or we're struggling with that, and I would think back to like we were not rebounding the ball at all this year very well, and he actually called me. He's like, Coach, what was this drill we did? And I think that's so flattering when they call back and we discuss different drills we did to get better at rebounding, or Mitch being in the same league. I'll see some of the similar out of bounds plays or situational things where he's trying to score with a special play or a special situation there. Greg Bright is running a lot of our Princeton stuff that he learned before that in his tenure. He wasn't much of a Princeton guy, so I think that's the fun part, the communication, the what did we used to do here. And the other fun thing is I've called them and been like, hey, remember back in 2015 we ran whatever for so and so, because we get older and we start to forget. That's the old saying, but we do start to forget more basketball than what we learned at one point. And so it's still great to have those guys. Like you said, I'll always consider them assistants, even if they're leading other programs, for sure.
Yeah, but my kind of the close on your coaching tree is, what makes a great assistant? And do you feel like, you've nurtured these coaches into, wanting to be a head coach or falling in love with basketball? Or do you feel like you've been more lucky in just finding really good coaches to be involved with that you've been able to benefit from while you had them and then root for them as they move along in their coaching career?
Well, I think number one, and we all hear these stories, Matt. Every coach out there knows of their buddies, or maybe it's happened to themselves, where they've had an unloyal assistant, somebody that is going behind their backs more so than maybe just a comment or two. I mean, it's only human nature to be like, man, Coach McBride is nuts. Like, there are days I'm nuts, but these guys have completely, every one of them, been loyal. I've never heard one thing that, oh, while he was coaching for you, he was saying this or he was doing that. And loyalty is the utmost number one importance. And I'll give myself a little credit. I think you earn that. And so I'm obviously doing something right also. And I don't mean that in any kind of egotistical way. Just the point that I think it comes to loyalty. And then with that loyalty, I mean, you took on a job. You're going to want to work. Luke Conley was really good at throwing in some new X and O's. Mitch was really good at wanting to do the personal workouts. Greg Bright, again, good classroom coach, would take care of the things behind the scenes you didn't want to deal with. Same Frank Spottelson. I miss Frank Spottelson, who went on coached at Canton South, also Mitch's dad. That they all had strengths, and I think once you see those strengths as a head coach, you just go ahead and foster them. I never tried to make anyone do something they didn't want to do or couldn't do or were uncomfortable doing. Let's do what you do best and do it at the best you can do. And with that, I think that loyalty came along. Left hand side there, Tom Wassity, just guy that's been around for years. He's been a volunteer assistant for me for 12 seasons now. I mean, it's just phenomenal. He wants to keep coming back, and we can't even get him a dime. Now he does work, so he only comes game night. He can't get out of his regular job, but fantastic human being. The kids love it when he comes around.
Yeah, to kind of close our time together, I'm interested in kind of thinking about your coaching career from a big picture standpoint, from a legacy standpoint. What would you say that you're most proud of? Is it a moment, an achievement, a season, an upset? What comes to mind as things that you're most proud of?
Well, I'm not proud that I didn't wear a big enough shirt in that first picture you show on the screen, and my stomach's hanging out there. Seriously, you don't really think about this until you've been in it this long. My most proud achievement is seeing these young men here that played years ago that are all successful. Some of them parents already, and they're bringing their kids to games, and
Yeah.
and just seeing that aspect that I truly believe sports is that avenue to success in life and success to having a good job and understand what it means to go to work on time and how to do all those disciplines that are needed to be a good worker, a good husband, a good father, whatever whatever else goes along with that. So that's my most proud achievement, just the numerous kids that I've seen go through that have just become fantastic community members, either here or in their community. I do have special pride. I mention a lot, maybe too much. Maybe I got to quit living in the past, talking about the 13, 14, 15, 16 teams, trying to put film up myself in the locker room when the kids come in. I don't think the last couple years we've played with the same intensity for all 32 minutes of the game like those kids did. So I think you're always trying to rival up to give some teams a chance to overachieve, like you said, when maybe that capability isn't there. And I think the hardest part is, like you said, just looking at legacy. It means you're coming close to the end of your career. I have made a decision at this point in my life that when that time comes, I've told my wife I'm going to spend it with her, and we're going to go south and see the boys. Jake lives in Charlotte, and Joe in West Palm Beach now. So I don't think I'm going to be that guy that hangs around on somebody's staff. I'm always going to have the phone ready. I'm always going to tell somebody what I think. I'm going to go to games, but I think I owe it to her to kind of relish in our retirement and be there for the boys. And grandbabies will be coming along the way, and I don't want to miss that part of my life.
Yeah, I've got an audience of basketball coaches that follow my content, and a lot of them are younger coaches. As a coach that's experienced a lot of things, been through a lot, achieved at a very high level, what advice would you have for young coaches just getting into the coaching industry?
Number one, listen to your gut. You've got to do what you want to do. Don't let someone else convince you otherwise. Don't try to act like you've got to do what somebody else wants you to do. Number two, I think the situation with parents, especially with young coaches, just be careful. It seems like there's more parent involvement than there used to be when I got started. Fortunately for me, that parent involvement usually is a conversation now because I've been here long enough to have that respect, and there's not a lot of going behind my back in those situations. But deal with those situations head on. Um, State your point. People are human. They are going to understand, I think, once you sit down and explain to them how you're feeling the way you're feeling or why you're doing the things that you're doing. But I think when we avoid those types of situations, they snowball on us. And number three, don't be afraid to push your players. Your players need pushed. They're at a day and age where the cell phone and video games are so easy to turn to. There's nights they need to go home and they need to feel bad about how practice went, or they need to feel bad about how a game went. That's the only way growth is going to happen. And so, I would say don't be scared to push your kids. Even if, again, a phone call comes because you've upset little Johnny tonight and he's pouting around the house. And you just got to convince the parents it's going to be good for little Johnny. He's going to grow up through this and he's going to be a better basketball player. So be true to yourself. I know they say it all the time. Deal with your parent issues head on. Be program oriented and celebrate the victories that your players have on and off the court.
Yeah, good stuff. I know a lot of coaches out there can, learn from advice like that. The last kind of question that I wanted to pose to you, coach, is just asking you to reflect on maybe the experiences or the opportunities that coaching has given you.
Well, I often think that the greatest respect that I get is in my social world of most people calling me coach. I think that is an honor and a privilege that people recognize that you coach. And to me, a coach is somebody that is helping to grow young people. If I'm at the course, I'm coach. If I'm in the community and I'm at Mark's shopping, hey coach, how you doing? And that to me is the most flattering thing that I go through in my social life is being known as coach. And the other reflective things that you said is just watching these young kids grow. It's going to be so fun to play a freshman and two sophomores this year. Starting four sophomores got time. Where's that growth going to be by the time they're seniors? That relationship is really going to foster with those young men, and I think that's going to be fantastic as I'm finishing my career, but yet they're starting their adulthood. I think we have something special that's going to be in the works here the next couple of years.
Yeah, to me, anybody that's ever coached me, I'm always going to address them as coach, even if they're not coaching currently. I mean, I think about a guy like Joe Bogdan, who was a basketball coach. He didn't necessarily coach me. He hasn't coached in probably 20 years at this point. And when I see him, I'm calling him coach for sure. Hey, I've really appreciated our conversation here tonight. I've enjoyed celebrating your coaching career. I really like telling these stories of coaches that have poured into, young men and young women through the choice of being a basketball coach. And this was a wonderful conversation that I enjoyed sharing with the world.
Matt, I really appreciate it. Coaches, good luck to all of you in your seasons. I hope you could get something out of this. I know that we all have different ideas and concepts, but hopefully in this hour and a half segment here, you were able to get enough information that maybe it's going to get you to think about something a little bit differently.
I got news for you, Coach. We're a lot closer to 2 hours than we were to the 90 minutes that I had planned, but I enjoyed every second of it. Very interesting. Coach, any final thoughts before we sign off for the night?
No, nothing in particular. Just ready to finish up another school year and hopefully rev up the juices for the summer and see what we're going to make going into next year.
Hey, I got to check you out a couple times this season. I'll look forward to checking you guys out next year and seeing how things are coming along. But I wish you to have a lot of success and luck here through your spring and your summer and your fall, getting ready for next season. So, Coach, we'll sign off there. We officially eclipsed 2 hours on our stream. Great conversation. Stay in touch.
Thanks, Matt. Will do.
Take care.